Hey, Mick.
Hey, did you see my note about just canceling today? I mean, we
Yeah.
don't have to. You and I can chat about the PR, although I haven't had a chance to look at the most recent updates. So
Okay, I
my
didn't.
I know my biggest thing before we do any kind of a merge is going to be that we need to clean up the commit history.
Uh, okay, I'm fine.
I mean, we can squash, but the 10 commits, some of which undo what earlier commits did, is kind of not makes life a little bit challenging for anybody who's trying to understand what's happening or
Well,
debug problems. So,
there is a lot happening in there.
yeah, well, it could definitely be organized more clearly. So.
Well, I'm okay. I'm okay. Clearly, it's more complex than the original that what we wanted to do originally. But
Well, yeah, but I think part of that is a reflection. Part of that complexity is a reflection of the fact that that code has not been touched in 6 years, and it's really bad code or old, decrepit, full of moth-eaten parts kind of code. So,
yeah,
I mean, the 5 different environment variables, each one of which is used in a different way with assumptions about fixed names for things and in certain cases and not fixed names for things in other cases. I mean, just looking at the Python in IIS client, it's, I mean, that has to be rewritten, even if I'm not sure how much you did on that, but that code has to be rewritten no matter what. So, I mean, just look at the look at the variable handling with keyword args in the init function, for example. So we have required variables, but we're passing them in through keyword args. Or we were, at least. So.
oh well, I haven't checked that.
I mean, what I'm saying is that that code is 6 years old, has not been looked at in 6 years. It was thrown together very quickly at the time. And since it hasn't broken badly since then, we've chosen not to go through and do the upgrades that we've been doing for everything else. So
Yeah. And it would be nice to adopt the attestation API, maybe. We
I'd
can
be
think about
happy
that.
just to have parameters passed in a clean way so that people can understand it. So, I mean,
Okay.
yes, the attestation API would be a fantastic thing, but we are not, at least currently, I don't know what the rest of the PR did over the last 2 days, but we are not currently set up to incorporate it in any reasonable way with the code that we have or had. So,
You mean this one?
I mean, prior to this PR, and I have not looked at what you've done over the last 2 days, but prior to this PR, the code that we had in there for doing registration and attestation was not in any form ready for a new API.
Yeah, I would say so. Yeah.
So,
Okay, so you want to discuss this separately or
yeah,
later? I
give
don't
me a
know.
chance to, I mean, I can use this hour to actually go through and do the review on that. I've got to do a review of Prakash's contracts. And you owe me feedback on the service groups.
On the other one. Yeah, okay. All right, sounds good. So let's
The
talk
nice
later.
part, I mean, the nice part about the service groups is it's really one major file, which is almost identical to the service database file that we had in there. So it's not a big thing. That introduces the new capability. And then everything else is just like, okay, let's remove a whole bunch of cruft that's no longer necessary in different places. So that part is good. I'm not happy with the tests, but that's just generally true. That one of the things that's very hard to do, I'm working through okay, writing the tests in the shell is extremely convenient, just because you can set up the environments really quickly and everything is there and you can actually march through the set of things that you want to do. Problem is that testing for success, when success and failure is to set a particular value in a particular field, testing for that correctness is nearly impossible. And that's the part that I'm struggling with. That way you have to, I mean, you end up doing this weird stuff of retrieving the JSON and then use another call in order to pull a value out of the JSON that comes back, and then you compare that to what you're looking for. And so the testing for the return value, testing for the success of or appropriate failure when it should fail, is like 10 lines of code every time you want to do it. And I'm just fed up with that. And that's part of the reason why the verify code was broken in the services database. Because there's no test for it, because I couldn't figure out how to write a test for it. So those, okay. I mean, this thing about, you know, and I would, I'll say for you as well, you have no tests right now for the registration. There are no automated ways to verify that the registration functions are working correctly. You are trusting right now the system level tests run on hardware to catch any failures that occur in the registration. I have the same issue with Prakash's code at CCF. There are no tests to verify that the policies were done correctly. We don't attempt to register a policy and then invalidate the policy in order to make sure that we're catching the invalid policies. If we look at the tests are 99% ones that I wrote for the client and high-level service behaviors. But there's almost nothing in there right now to test your parts of the code. We have some unit tests in Common, which are pretty good. But that's testing everything locally. It doesn't do anything remotely.
Yeah, we can add more tests. I'm always in favor of that. Yeah, so my only concern is that we started originally from actually I don't remember where we started from. I think we started either that we wanted to fix the SGX RTOR mode, or we're talking about the registration part. But every time we seem to spot well, either a problem or another feature that we want, mostly a problem.
Well, I don't see any of the stuff.
Grows.
Yeah, I don't see any of the stuff that we've got in the PR that you're doing as a new feature. Everything in there is cleaning stuff up in order to make it work. So again, you know, it's 6-year-old code, so I'm not holding anyone accountable for it. But the abuse we were making of the environment variables in there is what made it so ugly for your solution. I mean, really sourcing environment twice in order to get the right environment variables, I mean, that should have been an indication right there that something was wrong. That had to be done. And it's a completely, I mean, it solved your problem, but it's completely unmaintainable as to what happens. Because if we make any changes in environment in the interim between there, because we're adding additional functions or adding whatever, it would be completely overwritten by the stuff that was in there. So, I mean, it should have been an indication right there that you had to do that something was wrong.
Well, it is an indication. I totally agree with you. The thing is that I'm not sure to what extent the PR is reviewable right now, because it's fairly complicated. It touches 40 files.
Right, but I've asked you, I mean, one of the things I asked you specifically for was go back and separate out the fix for the environment variables. Get that done first. Push that part of it, and then come back with the Docker pieces. And this is the thing I've been asking for all along is just, what is the overall design? And then let's come up with a plan for how to fix that design, to how to get the code from where it is right now to meet that design. And it would have been a heck of a lot easier to just go through and do, you know, let's fix the environment variables. Then let's fix the IIS classes, client classes that are in there. That sets the stage for a really easy fix for the Docker pieces.
Well, the thing is that I didn't have any way to test those things.
You've been testing SGX mode for a long time. The original, I mean, removing the environment variables would not change the behavior, should not have changed the behavior at all.
Yeah, should not have changed the behavior. The thing is that I have been maintaining
any test you were running before should have run now, right?
Yeah, but the thing is that I've been maintaining the SGX starter mode for I don't know how long, and I don't know how many PRs unmerged I have regarding that. So essentially I need to find a better use of my time.
Well,
for that.
I think that's partially your responsibility as well on it for you know, coming back and proposing what the solution should be, getting agreement on the overall pictures of it, making sure that, I mean, again, sort of paying attention when we have to source the environment. That's probably an indication that there's some complexity in here that we should address, and that complexity probably needs to be addressed first. So, I mean, I think I hear what you're saying on this, and I think for the project as a whole, and you know, we are in the Hyperledger community call. So, you know, to that end, for the project as a whole, the focus needs to be on avoiding the band-aids and making sure that we've got something solid in the design. And yes, I mean, there's always a role for short-term stuff, right? But we have to, in this area in particular, because it's been so long and because it was such a band-aid stuff at the beginning, it just needed to be designed. And I mean, thought through more completely than here's the patches that I can apply to Docker in order to get a Docker image to run. So I hear what you're saying, and I also say that, you know, we have had the feedback about kind of stepping back and understanding what the entire process is end to end. And that would have made this PR a lot easier to do. So.
I sort of partially agree with that. And so the thing is that, again, the project is very complicated, and if for many parts I don't know the precise flows. So again, I rely on tests. And if somebody
no,
contributes,
wait. So don't rely on tests. Ask.
you can ask. Okay,
There are
but
a whole bunch of us that do have much more information about it, and kind of going off on your own is not efficient use of your time when there are a bunch of people you could ask that already have the information for you.
yes,
I mean, the first thing is not to go through, well, okay, you can do a cursory look at the tests or a cursory look at the other things that are going on. But you haven't asked me about how environment variables work or the rest.
I hear you, and I so I agree with you that well, nobody can just come in and drop 1,000 lines of code and pretend that everything is fine and will be merged. That's fine. That's why I communicated. I guess there are two philosophies here, and the philosophies are so one is to try to understand the code and see when and where one can contribute and eventually have that code merged. The other one, which I think I'm more biased towards this other one, is to say, hey, the code is too complicated. I may fix something, maybe find a band-aid for now, and another issue can be raised, and that's okay to address that later as well. I think it's a problem if every time somebody fixes something, then somebody else comes up, oh, but there is this that should be addressed first. And so, we never get the work done in that case.
Well, I completely disagree, because work is getting done. We're making great advances, and I think the things that we're doing are going through and removing a lot of the band-aids and going back to much more well-defined design solutions for the problem. I think we are going through a process of decomplicating the code, whether it's radically simplifying the approach we have for building the Docker images to starting to move towards a substantial progress towards everything's being CMake. But that happens largely because when we get into situations where we're doing unnatural things like sourcing the environment twice, we step back and we say, this is just wrong. Let's go figure out how to reduce the complexity so that we don't get in a situation where we have to do this thing that we know is just wrong. So I think part of what you're getting from me on this is, you're right, it's complicated, but it's complicated because you wrote it that way, right? And not wrote it once, but you wrote it, then patched it here, and then patched it here, and then patched it here. And it's just past that threshold for me, as somebody who's trying to use this code and understand and help maintain it. It's past the threshold of excessive complication, and it just needs to be simplified. So I agree, it's a complicated system, and that is its nature. It's not going to be some simple piece of code that way. I think the places where we need to do things like writing contracts has gotten an awful lot simpler. I think using the contracts has gotten an awful lot simpler. I think this process of doing the registration and managing the attestation pieces has not gotten better, and I think this PR gets us there. Well, again, I haven't looked at the last 2 days worth of stuff, so I may come back with a different opinion after I look at it. But but I think it's moving. The intent is moving us in the right direction.
I think so. Okay, I will leave you with two comments on the PR, just on the PR, which is so the first one is that every SGX keys and stuff now must be under PDO SGX key root,
which is a good thing. And where do you document the kind of canonical names on those? This is another one of my complaints about CCF is we use canonical names, assume canonical names, but I couldn't actually find a good place where we documented that.
Well,
I think I think the network cert PM is the only one that's well documented. So.
Well, I have updated the documentation that we have. Yeah, it should be complete, and so no new files, but the MD files that we have been updated as well. So that's one thing. The other thing is related to the. So I moved the complexity from the make file to a script as we were talking.
Right.
Now the thing is that this script takes care of well, like copying the enclave signing key into the container, and or copies the keys, the SGX keys also in the container. Now the enclave key is copied at build time. The SGX keys are copied at runtime in Xfer, and that's fine. Now, thing is that
they're moved from Xfer in the build script into whatever PDO, whatever we're
into PDO SGX root key
SGX root, yeah,
as defined within the container.
Right.
Yes, that's correct.
Okay,
now the thing is that I put the script in the Docker tools folder.
That's probably the right place for it.
Yeah. Because it's a Docker tool thing, although
it is and it isn't, because the other tools that are in there are things that are run inside the container. I think I think it's a reasonable place to put it. Just make sure that it's documented.
Okay.
I mean, my original intention when I put the tools folder in there was not that all of those tools would necessarily be things that would be used internally. I mean, inside the container. But just that these were the tools that these are the scripts where we pull out the complex set of actions that I mean, Michael's original thing had a continuation line, I think, of 40 lines in there, just anding multiple commands together in order to get there. And there's a reason why he did it, right? Because it makes it easier to identify the different layers in the container, right? But it also makes it completely unmanageable. And so I copied as much of that stuff out into a single file so that you can execute that file. You get some of the bad advantages of the layering, but you do get a script that you can look at, edit, reasonably comment in what you're doing. So the original intent of the tools directory was simply, this is what we need in order to move the complexity out so we can see the logic in the build files without necessarily getting so into the details that we can't understand what's happening. So I think the intent is that this is the place where we put stuff, not specifically that this is the stuff that gets moved into the container.
Okay.
So I think it's a very reasonable place to put it. And we'll just use it from there.
Yeah, if we put it that way, it achieves the purpose, I think. Yeah. Right. Okay, sounds good.
Okay, so I will take a look at it and I'll get you feedback on where we are. I mean, the only thing that I would recommend is going back and, can you order, well, squash the commits where they're appropriate to squash. And by the way, one of the things that I do on that, I don't know if you get in the habit, is when I have a whole bunch of complexity that way, I just squash everything back to one, then do a soft reset, and then add things to commits. restructure them and add them to the commits in smaller chunks that way.
So I
So you
do
get-
that too, but I have a problem there, which is, so I can do that, and I
But
can
these
have,
are all interdependent, which is the problem, right?
well, the thing is that I think we still want commits that don't break the
Yeah.
CI, right?
And you're not gonna have,
That's the problem.
well, I mean, if you push, the CI will only run on the last commit that you run. So if you push a branch with 3 commits, the CI is only gonna run on the third one. It doesn't run on the intermediate ones.
No, I mean, so long as I have all the modifications committed, yeah, it will run fine. But if I have 3 commits and the first one breaks and the other 2 fix stuff, is it fine?
Well, for this particular case, let me turn this around. Our basic principle of don't break the commit or don't break the build has to compete with maintain clarity. So my question would really be, what will help somebody who comes in later and looks at this understand the logical flow of updates through this series of commits? And if we have to do something unnatural to make the commits successful, I mean, to make them build successfully and cost ourselves in clarity, is it worth it?
Well, yeah, but it happened in the past that I don't remember if you, but definitely Michael, for example, was looking for memory leaks that broke
Yeah,
this.
when you're
Yeah, so
doing
what would
whatever
commits,
yep.
and you go through the commits that were in main, looking for the one that broke the everything. And yeah, I mean, if we have again commit that break the CI, that's that makes like
Yeah, you're right. So I'll stand by what I said there, which is if you end up having to do something that's so unnatural in order to make the build work, then mark that commit as this breaks the build but increases the clarity. I mean, in the commit message, this is not this will break the build, but it's going to be fixed in the next commit or something to that effect. But especially for the work that you're doing on this, because it's so, I mean, this protocol is so central and it's so important to get it right. Clarity, I think, clarity of the intermediate commits and correctness of the final commit is more important than lack of clarity and correctness of each individual commit.
So it's a fair point, I guess. Yeah.
So I mean, my request would be just take a look at it, and if it breaks into natural components that you can push independently, then do that. But I mean, clearly we got to do something with it. We could just squash everything together into one Uber commit. That feels wrong. But it's better than having, this one fixes what I just did 2 minutes ago and whatever. So
yeah, okay. Let's see if I can organize things differently.
Yeah, and I'm, do what you can for it. Like I said, I'll give you my feedback. So.
All right, sounds good.
Okay. The Service DB one touches a lot of stuff. I don't think any of it is sophisticated. And I do think it makes, because we were trying to do all of these file loads in weird places for the groups, and we had multiple files, and sometimes they were in and sometimes they weren't. It was making a mess out of things. I think having the persistent file will make things better. And then the next thing we got to look at eventually is context. And I kind of go back and forth on whether or not that should be something that's persistent. So I don't have a good conceptual framework for simplifying that. They're necessary. I mean, we can't do these complex contracts without it, but I don't know how to simplify that one yet. So
Yeah, I hear you. You're trying to make sweeter 2000 lines PR.
yeah, well, I'm doing my best, but you know, okay, so if it's any consolation,
Yeah.
this also means, and you know, what I'm also giving you is there's a big Jupyter PR that I have coming that adds interactive updates for keys and groups and sites and all the rest of the stuff. So it would not have been possible without the PR, without the service groups PR. So, and by the way, it's not 2000 lines. It's, you know, 800 lines that go away and 1200 lines that come on. So
So you have to review all of
it's
them.
only 400 lines, you know.
Sure. Yeah, it's a good way to count the modification.
Okay, and in my defense,
You touch less files. That's
well,
than
it's
me.
the main file that has the new database that's a big one, and it's completely new and it's worth reviewing well. But I at least provided you with a new set of tests for it, which is more than I can say for somebody on this call. So
Got it. Got it.
there's a big, well, okay, this is actually true. A big chunk of the lines changed is in the tests. So for whatever it's worth.
That's good. We need that. Okay.
Anything else?
Nope.
Okay. Thanks for your persistence. I know I'm kind of being a taskmaster about this one, but I will stand by what I say, which is I think your observation about complexity is exactly right. And my response to that is, okay, you have an opportunity to reduce the complexity, take advantage of that opportunity. So I think we're both trying to accomplish the same thing at some level.
Yeah, I think so. I think so.
Okay. Thanks,
Okay.
Bruno.
Thanks, Mick. Bye.
Bye.